The wind curled through the canyons of Ares like a whisper with teeth. Dry, mineral-laced, and thick with heat rising from the fault lines that spidered beneath the crust. Twin moons hung above like pale, watching eyes, their cold glow spilling over the jagged spires and painting every shadow in blue-gold contrast. Underfoot, the rock crackled faintly, just enough to remind Luke Rains that he wasn't walking on stable ground, but on the fractured bones of a world still alive. He adjusted the strap on his shoulder, the scanner case digging into his back, and cursed softly. Another world. Another survey. Another contract stuffed into a file no one would ever read unless the minerals turned out valuable enough to justify someone's bonus. He wasn't here to explore. Not really. He was here to scan manganese veins, tag the coordinates, and transmit. The claim before the rival crews got wise, that was the job. Had been for years. Show up, extract, leave. No connection, no consequence. But this world felt. Off the descent logs had flagged ambient noise. Anomalies, strange blips that corporate dismissed as wind or echo artifacts. But Luke felt it in his spine. The way pressure shifted without weather. The way silence in the canyons wasn't empty. Just waiting. He found the cave mouth half hidden behind a collapse of crystalline shale. Stalactites like jagged teeth framed the entrance, their calcite edges glowing faintly under moonlight. They reminded him of the mouth of some sleeping beast, huge, ancient, and only pretending to rest. He ducked inside. The crunch of his boots on loose rock echoing too loud. Inside. The walls shimmered with mineral threads, veins of violet, copper green, and deep basalt split by glowing inclusions like frozen lightning. He held up the scanner, and it hummed, slow at first, then quickened with a rhythmic ping. Manganese high grade. Jackpot. He knelt to tag the reading. The cave exhaled. That was the only way he could describe it. A low, rolling sound somewhere. Between a growl and a purr rose from deeper within the rock. The air shifted. Musky, dense, full of something primal that hadn't been logged in any xenobiology file he'd ever skimmed. His breath caught. He straightened, turning his wrist lamp to scan the shadows. Something flicked out of view. Black, glossy, silent. He spun, light beam slicing across uneven stone, and then froze. There, half shrouded in darkness, stood a tall figure, furred, lean, impossibly still. Golden eyes glowed like twin embers in a black sea. She stepped forward once, the light catching the shimmer of dark fur, long limbs coiled with strength, and a tail that moved slow, deliberate, like a blade testing air. Instinct screamed. Not human. Not beast. Not log. His multi-tool stayed holstered. Instead, he raised his hands in open peace, voice low and steady. "I'm just here to scan," he said. "I didn't know," and then it happened. His lamp shifted, casting a glare across his hand, and he instinctively reached to adjust it. His fingers brushed soft fur. Her tail. Barely a graze, but the sound that followed cracked through the cave. Like thunder, a growl, not anger, something deeper. Something that rearranged the space between them. Her eyes narrowed. In a blink. She moved. Claws closed around his wrist, not tight enough to injure, just enough to command, and with a jerk. So fluid it felt like gravity shifted, she pulled him forward, deeper into the den. He stumbled. Breath stolen, heart hammering. Not in fear of death. But in fear of what he had just awakened. They moved down a narrow path, torchlets flickering along the walls. And then the shadows shifted again. From the tunnels ahead and behind, eyes began to appear, dozens of them, glowing, watching. He was no longer alone. He hadn't just trespassed into a cavern. He had stepped into the heart of something far more evolved, far more ancient, and far more alive than any mining report had dared to mention. The ground beneath Luke's boots changed, first subtle but immediate. Stone gave way to something smoother, almost sculpted, and the stale mineral scent of the upper cave was replaced by something richer: earth, ash, the faint coppery trace of heated metal. Above him, the cave narrowed, forming natural archways that arched like ribs into a deeper body. The dim torchlight didn't flicker as fire should. Instead, it pulsed, glowing steady and slow like the beat of a giant's heart. Buried deep beneath the world, Norah didn't speak as she led him. Her grip had shifted from restraining to something more symbolic, fingers no longer clenched but still wrapped around his wrist like a silent reminder. You don't belong here yet. They descended, passing etchings in the wall spirals, claws, symbols that looked like stories told without a voice. Luke tried not to stare at her tail as it swayed ahead of him, but the memory of his mistake still stung like frostbite. Her body was carved from power. Each step, each breath carried the weight of law, tradition, danger. He hadn't touched a warrior. He'd provoked one. And now he was in her den, her world, her mercy. Finally, they entered a chamber. It opened like a throat, wide and echoing, lit from above by thin cracks in the stone that bled faint light from the moons. At the center was a fire pit ringed with dark stone. Above, crystal veins flickered in the walls like stars trapped in rock. A dozen pairs of eyes met his from the shadows. They were already waiting. The figures stood along the edges of the den, half shrouded in smoke. Some leaned on spears. Others stood perfectly still, tails curling slowly like question marks. None of them spoke. None of them blinked. Norah let go of his wrist and stepped forward. She spoke in her language, low, sharp, rhythmic, not aggressive, but firm. A declaration, his. Translator implant tried to catch up, but the words came too fast, too layered with nuance. Only fragments filtered through. Outsider, tail challenge. Thorn right, claimed. Luke blinked. She wasn't just warning them. She had staked something on him. A massive figure emerged from the shadows, gray-furred, older, draped in armor that looked grown instead of forged. An elder. The others quieted further, which Luke didn't think was possible. The elder lifted a carved staff and struck the stone twice. The sound rang out like a bell wrapped in bone. Norah turned, golden eyes locking on his. She spoke again, slower. The translator pulsed in his ear. You pulled the tail of a warrior. You triggered the right. The thorn test. I accepted. Why? He asked, voice cracking slightly. She stepped closer. Because leaving it unanswered would shame me, she said, and because you didn't run. She gestured to the flames. 3 polished stones had been placed beside the fire, black, red, and pale gray. 3 trials, she said. You pass, we both walk free. And if I don't? Her eyes didn't flinch. Then I fall. And you disappear. Her voice had no fear in it. Just fact, he swallowed. What are the trials? Norah nodded to the stones. First, the echo hunt. You'll track a beast older than our bloodlines, silent, sacred. You'll find a scale, not a corpse. A gift, not a conquest. She pointed to the red stone. Second, the ember feast. Prepare. Food from volatile pods. Cook without fire, without explosion. Eat without burning. She touched the pale one last. Third, the soul verse. You will speak before the clan. Not words, truth. If it is not yours, they will feel the lie. And you will be cast. Luke took a step back, staring at the fire. The flames crackled, but the heat felt cold. What if I don't know the truth? Then you'll fail, she said simply. He laughed, dry and bitter. This all started because I reached for a lamp. No, she said, voice like stone sharpening a blade. This started because you touched something you didn't understand and didn't flinch when it growled. The elder spoke again. Norah turned. They accept your challenge. The rites begin at moonfall. The den stirred. Murmurs spread like smoke, not fearful, but curious. Warriors stepped back into the dark, leaving only Norah, Luke, and the firelight. He sank onto a stone slab, hands trembling now that the adrenaline faded. He wasn't on a survey mission anymore. He was a participant in something, ancient and unforgiving. Norah crouched across from him. Slowly, she unsheathed a curved blade and began sharpening it along a wet stone, her motion slow, deliberate, almost meditative. Her eyes flicked up to him once. "You'll sleep here tonight," she said. Double quotes, "Am I your prisoner?" "No," she said. "You're my problem." He didn't argue. The fire snapped, sparks rising into the cavern ceiling. The shadows shifted like watching shapes. Somewhere in the deep tunnel, something howled, not a beast, not a warning. A call. Norah paused her sharpening. "They've heard," she said. "The crystal hide is listening." He leaned forward. You going to help me?" "No," she said. "That would be cheating." Her tail flicked once behind her. "But I won't let you die easy." He wasn't sure if that was mercy or promise. The firelight caught on her golden eyes again, and for a second, the world still. Not fear, not lust. Something older. Recognition. The cavern did not sleep. As the twin moons crawled higher above the surface of Ares. Their pale light threaded through cracks in the stone ceiling, bleeding into the den in long silver strands. The fire had died down to a restless glow, but the air remained thick, warm, tense. Somewhere deep in the lower tunnels, mineral winds sighed against the walls like ghosts remembering their names. And Luke couldn't close his eyes. His back ached from the slab floor. His mind wouldn't stop spinning. Not with the weight of what waited. The echo hunt. The first trial of the thorn test. He rose just before mooncrest, breath misting faintly. As he stood, Norah was already awake. She sat by the edge of the den's hearth, sharpening her blade again, not because she needed to use it, but because that sound, metal on stone, was her morning prayer. Her discipline, her grounding. She looked up as he approached. "You slept." "I didn't," he said. "Good," she replied. No comfort. No lie. Just the truth. She rose, tail flicking once, and handed him a folded scrap of slate etched with hand-drawn lines, crude but precise. A map of the lower caverns. She tapped a narrow gorge drawn in jagged curves. "You'll find the shimmerfall here. The crystal hide nests in the hollows beyond. They molt there. And if I meet one, don't corner it," she said. "Don't run either. It listens to breath. And panic breath is loud." He nodded, swallowing hard. Then she handed him the whistle. Small, bone-carved. A single amber crystal pulsed in its center, like it had a heartbeat of its own. "Resonance lure," she explained. "Blow it once when you're near the steam. It might come, it might not. If it does, you wait. You show respect. You accept what it gives." He took it carefully, cradling it like a fragile artifact. "Do not draw blood," she added, stepping closer. "If you do, the test ends. You fail. I fall. I understand." "Do you?" she asked, her voice lower now. "This is not about catching prey. It's about being seen without fear." He met her eyes. "I don't want to win," he said quietly. "I just don't want to shame you." Something passed between them, then unspoken. Not trust. Not yet. But the possibility of it. Norah nodded and turned away. "Go." The path to the shimmerfall narrowed as he descended, torchlight fading behind him until only the glow of bioluminescent moss lit his way. The walls wept moisture, slick with mineral sweat. He ducked under low arches, crawled through tight corridors, and finally emerged into an amphitheater-shaped chamber. And there it was. The shimmerfall, ribbons of steam, rose from cracks in the stone floor, turning moonlight into liquid gold. Pools of water glowed faintly blue, rimmed with silver crust. It looked like a dream trying to remember how to be real. Luke stepped carefully, the whistle trembling in his palm. He knelt by the edge of the largest pool and blew once. No sound came. Not really. Just a pulse like a ripple in the air. He waited. Seconds stretched into minutes. Then a vibration thrummed beneath his boots. His breath caught. From the far edge of the chamber, something shimmered, moved. And then emerged. The crystal-hide beast. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Part reptile, part mineral, six-legged and low to the ground, its body a mass of shifting scales that caught the shimmerfall light and fractured it into 1,000 swirling patterns. Its head was narrow, crowned with antennae that waved through the steam like tendrils testing the air. It didn't charge, didn't growl. It simply watched. Luke didn't move. Slowly, he reached into his belt pouch and removed a small stone, one Norah had given him. Warmed by his body heat, he placed it on the ground before him and slid it forward like an offering. Creature tilted its head. A long silence followed. Then, in one graceful motion, it moved forward, not to take, not to strike, but to brush its flank against a jagged stone outcrop. A single scale, violet-edged, dark as obsidian, fluttered to the ground. The beast turned, tail trailing steam, and vanished back into the shimmerfall like a ghost slipping through a curtain. Luke exhaled, shoulders trembling. He stepped forward, lifted the scale carefully, and wrapped it in cloth. This wasn't victory. It was a gift. He retraced his steps through the caverns in silence, feeling the weight of what he carried, not just in his hand, but in what it meant. He reached the den. At the edge of moonset, the fire had been rekindled. Norah stood at the far end, arms crossed, watching him. He didn't speak. He only unwrapped the cloth and held the scale out to her. Her eyes flicked to it. Then to him. She took it. Her fingers brushed his, just slightly, and for a moment she didn't look like a warrior guarding her pride. She looked like someone relieved. Then she turned to the elder, placed the scale in his hands, and stepped back. The staff struck the stone once. Passed. The den murmured. Quiet ripples of surprise, maybe. Even approval. Luke stood still, waiting to breathe. Norah stepped beside him, not in front of him. Not behind. Beside. Double quotes. You listened, she said softly. He nodded. Double quotes. I tried. She didn't smile, but her tail curled once, brushing lightly against his calf. Good. The crystal-hide scale was placed in the den's central wall, a mark of passage. But the greater mark was this. No one looked at Luke like prey anymore, and Norah didn't look at him like a mistake. The morning after the echo hunt arrived with a stillness that was not peace. The den stirred, but something in the air had shifted, less like celebration, more like tension waiting to be named. The warriors moved quietly, their movements sharper, their glances faster. The echoes of Luke's success had rippled farther than he expected, and not everyone welcomed it. He sat alone near the outer alcove, sipping a bitter root drink Norah had handed him without a word. It cleared the mind, she'd said, and it did burning. Straight down his throat like honesty. Norah had been distant since he returned with the crystal-hide scale. Not cold, not angry, measured. Like she was calculating every step before taking it. Her silence wasn't punishment. It was preparation. And then the silence shattered. A howl rang out near the den's outer wall. Not warning. Not alarm. Challenge. Warriors moved quickly, forming a half circle near the archway, spears drawn but not aimed. Norah appeared at Luke's side, hand against his chest before he could move. Stay behind me, she said. Her voice was calm, but something under it hummed. With tension. Kraith stepped into the den like he owned the ground. Taller than Norah, broader, his fur a shade of burned silver and marked with long, visible scars, proof that he'd survived more than ritual. His armor gleamed with ceremonial polish, and his green eyes burned like fire behind ice. He cheated. Kraith said, voice carrying unnaturally loud. Used off-world tools, faked the scale, or was gifted it. His gaze cut to Norah. Perhaps with help. A murmur passed through the den, hesitant and uncertain. Doubt was a poison, and Kraith knew how to pour it slow. Norah stepped forward before Luke could. Her body blocked Kraith's path completely. Her voice snapped like a whip, fast, sharp, and heavy with command. The translator lagged behind, trying to catch up, spitting fragments. Trial honored, no fraud. You insult the right. Kraith smirked. I insult nothing, he said. I demand truth. If the outsider is real, let him prove it again, now. The elder at the hearth struck the stone with his staff once. The den quieted. Norah looked at Luke. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. This was a test, not just of him, but of her choice. Luke stepped forward. I didn't cheat, he said clearly. And I didn't run, he paused, scanning the faces. Some were wary. Some were waiting. Test me again. Tonight. I'll take the second right now. Norah's head snapped toward him. Her eyes wide for the first time since he'd met her. Didn't stop him. Kraith's smugness flickered. He hadn't expected defiance, especially not offered freely. The elder conferred with the others, then raised the staff again. The ember feast would begin immediately. The preparation alcove was more than a kitchen. It was a crucible. Roots, herbs, bark strips, and the volatile ember pods were laid across the stone table, their skins twitching faintly like things that breathed. Norah stood opposite him, saying nothing as she handed him a stone blade, a bone, ladle, and a flat pan carved with runes. The pods, she said, will explode if you cut too fast. Or if they sense fear. Good, he muttered. I'm only terrified. Her eyes narrowed. Don't joke, she said. Listen. He nodded, focusing. The ember pods were plump and red, with mottled yellow veins. They pulsed slightly under. His fingers, not alive but aware, he steadied his breathing. Remembered how he'd cooked aboard long-haul ships, field meals, ration kits. How he'd once survived 2 weeks on boiled vines and fungus. Pace. But this wasn't survival. This was performance. He picked up the blade and made the first cut slow, smooth, deliberate. The pod hissed faintly, but didn't rupture. He peeled. It skinned back like folding silk, revealing the molten core inside. Then he crushed the pulp into the ladle, careful not to spill, and added the herb Norah had pointed to earlier, a bitter-smelling sprig used to balance the heat. Then came the fire. But not too hot. He placed the ladle over the coals, stirring in slow, rhythmic circles. The mixture shifted from red to orange to glowing amber. Not bubbling. Not hissing. Perfect. He withdrew the ladle and set it on a slate plate. Norah stepped forward and dipped one claw into the mixture. She tasted it. Her face didn't change, but her tail stopped moving. She handed the ladle to the elder. The silence was long. Crushing. Then the staff struck. The stone again. The den exhaled. Passed. The feast was not a celebration. Not yet. But the murmur of voices carried warmth now. Warriors looked at Luke differently, not with suspicion, but with curiosity. Interest. Kraith stood near the shadows, jaw clenched. He'd lost ground, and Luke had gained something far more important than approval. Norah stepped beside him, her arms crossed but her body closer than before. Not touching but near. You could have failed, she said. I know. Why risk it now? Because he wasn't challenging me, Luke said. He was challenging you. She stared at him a moment. Then nodded once. Don't make me regret it. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The fire cracked between them, sending sparks into the air. Tonight wasn't victory. Tonight was survival earned. And for the first time, Luke realized he wasn't just passing trials. He was becoming someone who wanted to. The fire in the den had burned low, but not out. Its embers glowed like the buried hearts of stars, casting faint orange halos onto the cavern walls. Around it, the clan murmured in quiet clusters, some sharpening weapons, others passing drinks, all of them watching without watching. The air had changed. No longer sharpened by suspicion, but still heavy like a storm had paused overhead, waiting for its moment. Luke sat cross-legged near the fire, the bone ladle from the ember feast still resting on the ground beside him. The mixture had cooled into a faintly iridescent paste, a silent reminder that he had survived a second right. But survival wasn't safety. Not here. Not yet. Norah hadn't spoken to him since the trial ended. She'd stood beside him, yes, but her silence was longer now, deeper. It wasn't coldness. He was starting to understand that with her, silence didn't mean distance. It meant pressure. It meant something was coming. When she finally approached, she didn't sit. "Come," she said simply. Luke rose without hesitation. They walked without speaking, past the hearth, through the narrow carved corridors where the walls breathed with heat and memory. The air here was different, colder, older. Carved symbols ran across every surface, glowing faintly with embedded crystal light. They pulsed not with power, but with remembrance. The past lived here. She led him into a domed chamber that opened like a stone heart. In the center stood a ring of black stone, waist-high, encircling a single platform. Etched into its surface were a dozen concentric spirals, each layered with runes that shimmered when the moon's overhead aligned. This was not a place of trial. This was a place of judgment. Norah turned, her expression unreadable. "This is where the soul verse will happen," she said. Luke nodded, stepping forward slowly. He looked down at the platform. It felt warm, not from heat, but from memory. Like 100 voices had once stood here, cracked open, and left their truths behind. Like shed skin. "You said I had to speak truth," he said quietly. "Not just a story. Not just your truth," she corrected. "The truth. The one that hurts to say. The one you carry behind your ribs like a shard you won't name." He looked up at her. "And if I say something beautiful? If I tell them what they want to hear?" Her eyes narrowed. "They'll know." He swallowed. "What if I fail?" "Then we both fall," she said. "And everything you've earned becomes dust." A long silence stretched between them. "Finally," he asked, "why is this one the last?" She looked away, her jaw tight. "Because the other trials test your instincts. This one tests your soul." Luke turned back to the platform. "You ever stood here?" "Yes," she said softly. "I was 16. My father had just died. I was expected to take his place. I didn't want to." He turned to face her. "So, what did you say?" Her eyes met his. "That I was afraid." He blinked. "And they let you lead anyway?" "No," she said. "They let me survive. I earned leadership later." He was about to speak when a howl cut through the chamber sharp, deliberate, echoing off stone. Norah froze. "Craith." Luke's fists clenched. "He's not going to let this end without a fight." "No," she said. "He'll challenge you before the soul verse. If he defeats you, the bond breaks. You're cast out. I'm discredited. He won't beat me. You don't know how he fights. Then he doesn't know how I survive." Her lips almost curved. Almost. They returned to the den's center. The fire had been rekindled. Warriors gathered in a wide circle, forming the ritual ring. Craith stood inside it already, waiting. He was unarmed. This wasn't to be settled with claws. This was to be settled with words. The final rite had begun. The soul verse. The clan watched. In perfect silence, Craith spoke first. His voice echoed with practiced control, threading poison through each syllable. He painted Luke as a manipulator, a drifter who had stumbled into a sacred rite by accident and rode Norah's protection to status he hadn't earned. He questioned Norah's judgment. He questioned Luke's honor. He questioned the bond itself. He finished with a flourish measured and cold. "If this is who we trust," he said, "then we are no longer warriors. We are storytellers begging outsiders to believe in our myths." No one clapped. No one moved. The silence was worse than noise. Then the staff struck stone once. Luke stepped into the circle. He didn't project his voice. He didn't gesture. He just stood there, letting the firelight sketch sharp lines across his face. "I pulled her tail," he said. A murmur moved through the crowd. "That's how it started," he continued. "I didn't know what it meant. Where I come from, it would have been a joke. But here, it meant everything. And instead of killing me, she stood between me and the consequences." He looked at Norah. She didn't protect me because she had to. She did it because she was willing to risk something I didn't even understand. His voice trembled not from fear, but from truth pushing through. "I've lived on ships and mining colonies. Places where people only show up to take. I was one of them. I didn't think that made me weak. I thought that made me smart." He paused, breath shallow. "But then I met someone who doesn't take. She chooses. Every step, every word, every risk." He looked at the clan. "I don't know your rituals. I don't speak your language well, but I stood in your hunt. I cooked your feast, and I'm still here because I didn't run." His voice dropped lower. "Because for once in my life, I found something I didn't want to run from." The fire flared, and the silence that followed wasn't judgment. It was wait. Then the elder rose. He tapped the staff once. Twice. The soul verse was accepted. Luke stepped back. Norah approached, not smiling, but something had changed in her eyes. Softening. A reckoning. "You said too much," she whispered. "I didn't say enough." He replied. She didn't argue. Instead, she stepped beside him and stayed. The moons had dipped behind the ridge, leaving only their faint afterglow in the cave sky. The den had quieted again, not from exhaustion, but from reverence. The soul verse had been sung, accepted. No more trials, no more rites. By law and tradition, Luke and Norah were bound not by blood, not by ceremony, but by the oldest force on Ares, truth shared before the flame, and yet something trembled beneath the calm. Luke felt it first through the solace of his boots. A faint hum, irregular, pulsing deep under the stone like a heartbeat trapped in a different body. Norah felt it too. She paused mid-stride as they crossed the inner hall, her ears twitching. She turned her gaze toward the wall like she could hear through it. "The gate," she said. He didn't have to ask which. They descended fast, moving through the deep corridors that twisted away from the den's main arteries. Fewer torches were lit here. The walls were darker, etched with ancient warnings that shimmered faintly in their wake. Luke recognized one symbol, a spiral set in flame. Norah had pointed it out once before. The Great Silence. A mark of pre-collapse text sealed by clan. Decree. The Stargate chamber had changed. Before, it had slept rings dormant, runes dulled like ash cooled from an ancient fire. Now it pulsed. The rings turned slowly, each one sliding over the other with rhythmic precision. Glyphs along their edges lit up in sequence, like a machine remembering itself. Luke stepped closer, his voice hushed. "You activated it?" Norah shook her head. "I showed it to you. But I never touched the core." Then her jaw tightened. "Kraith." "Did?" The name felt like a stone dropped into cold water. "When?" Luke asked. "After the soul verse," she said. "He came here alone, tried to override the restraint glyphs. He failed, but he woke it up." Luke stepped around the platform, examining the configuration. It didn't just look active, it looked hungry. It was drawing power from somewhere, deep, somewhere old. His eyes traced the curved channels carved into the rock resonance pathways. He tried to force a pulse. Luke said, voice tight. He must have thought he could unlock it, use it, make himself more than warrior, make himself a god. Norah didn't speak. She didn't have to. The weight of it was already pressing on both of them. If this thing goes critical... Luke didn't finish. The ridge collapses, Norah said. The den dies. Everything beneath it gets turned to glass. He stepped back, heart hammering. We need to shut it down. Can you? She asked. He looked at her, and for the first time since the trials began, fear touched the edge of his voice. Maybe. He turned toward the core. This isn't just a gate. It's a frequency conduit. It's listening to the crust, trying to find a harmony to release its charge. So it's like a song? Norah asked. It's like a scream, Luke said. If we don't redirect it, it'll hit resonance and blow the whole mountain. She stepped beside him. Then we redirect it. They worked fast. Norah pulled open the shielding rings, exposing the inner glyphs etched in silver thread. Luke adjusted the harmonic relay stones, aligning them with a tunnel path he'd mapped during his early survey one that ran deep into uninhabited rock. We send the energy down there, he said. Let it burn out into the depths. How? Long? She asked. Minutes, maybe less. He was halfway through calibrating the final glyph when he felt it, a presence at the chamber entrance. Crayth. He stood flanked by two warriors, both younger, both visibly uncomfortable. His claws were unsheathed. His armor glinted with ritual polish, and his voice rang out like a blade hitting stone. Step away. Norah turned first, body shifting into battle readiness instantly. You did this, she said. I woke it, Crayth said, voice full of venom. But I was trying to reveal the truth. You were shielding him. Hiding this, I was protecting the den. By binding yourself to him, Crayth snarled. By choosing him over tradition? Luke didn't move from the console. He's not your threat, Norah growled. You are. Crayth's eyes narrowed. If you won't stop this, I will. He stepped forward. Norah met him head on. They collided in a blur of motion claws raking, limbs snapping, neither holding back. No ritual now, no rules, just fury. Luke kept working. The resonance was climbing. The glyphs flickered violently. It was almost ready, but the alignment had to be exact. Norah slammed Crayth against the wall, but he twisted and struck back, driving her to the floor. Stone cracked under their feet. One of the younger warriors flinched but didn't move. Luke input the final sequence and drove his hand down on the control glyph. The gate flared. Light exploded across the chamber. The air turned molten. The ring screamed and twisted, funneling energy into the tunnel below in a stream of fire so bright it turned shadows. Inside Out. Crayth froze mid-strike as the force knocked him back. Dust fell from the ceiling like stars, torn loose from the sky. And then it was over. The machine dimmed. The hum faded. The gate was quiet again. Luke collapsed to his knees, breath ragged. His skin buzzed with leftover charge. Norah stood above Crayth, blood trailing from a cut along her brow. You've lost, she said. Voice raw. Crayth didn't answer. She looked over at Luke, and for once, her shoulders sagged. You did it, she said. So did you, he replied. They stood in the silence left behind by near catastrophe, surrounded by a machine that had nearly become their tomb. And yet neither of them looked away. Not from the gate. Not from each other. Not anymore. The storm rolled in slowly, veiled behind layers of mist and silence, like the planet itself was exhaling after holding its breath too long. The ridge above the den was still streaked with soot from the redirected gate pulse, blackened veins, now etched into the stone as a permanent scar. Below, The valley shimmered in the pale morning light, alive with movement, breath, and a new kind of stillness, the stillness after survival. But within the den, nothing was still. The elders had summoned a final circle, not a rite, not a punishment, but something else. Something sacred. Norah and Luke stood side by side before the fire, their silhouettes cast long across the stone floor. The bone sigils carved markers of the thorn test had been polished and presented. One for him, one for her. Luke turned his over in his palm. The carving was simple. 2 intersecting spirals, one black, one silver, bound by a thread of crimson. The mark of a bond forged by fire and proven by truth. Norah took hers without hesitation and slipped it onto a strip of leather she wore across her chest, where the elder symbols of her clan's lineage already rested. She had carved out space. For this one, for him. He looked at her. Not to ask permission, not to seek assurance, just to see if she still chose him, and she did. He looped his sigil onto the cord she handed him, her cord. It was old leather, worn smooth by years, the edges fraying from wind and battle. A gift not for ceremony, but for truth. The oldest elder stepped forward and spoke only one phrase, their voice carrying the final weight of law and legacy. The challenge was made. The challenge was met. The bond is honored. No applause. No song. Just stillness. The kind that settles when a world decides not to crumble. Later, Norah led him up a narrow, steep trail behind the den, a hidden path that spiraled along the mountainside. No one followed. This wasn't tradition. This was choice. The climb was long and the wind sharp with mineral tang. They said nothing as they ascended. There was nothing to say that hadn't already been spoken in silence, in scars, in the heat of near death. When they reached the summit, Luke paused. Below them, the valley stretched out in full rivers of crystal, forests that shimmered in the dusk, the den barely a dot tucked into the rock's curve. And beyond that, the jagged horizon of a world he had come to claim. And instead had been claimed by Norah crouched at the edge of the cliff, her arm resting casually on one bent knee, her golden eyes not watching the land but listening to it. She'd stopped being a warrior in that moment. Or maybe she'd simply become something more. He sat beside her, not behind. Not in front. Beside. After a long silence, she spoke. When I was younger, I thought the thorn test was a trap, she said. A way to chain us to strangers chosen by accident. He didn't interrupt, but it's not the test that binds us. It's what we do inside it. He nodded slowly. I didn't understand it at first, he said. I thought surviving it would be enough. Then I thought winning would prove something. But the test didn't make me who I am. It just showed me who I wasn't before. She turned her head, studying him. And who are you now? He looked at the valley, the rivers, the place that had tried to kill him and then taught him to belong. Someone who doesn't want to leave. Norah didn't smile. Not quite. But her eyes warmed. She reached behind her belt and pulled a small leather cord with a single violet-edged scale tied to it, the one from the crystal-hide beast. Without a word, she tied it to the hilt of his blade, the one he'd sharpened beside. Her nights ago, memory, she said. He exhaled softly. Thank you. She stood, brushed her hands clean on her thigh armor, then offered him her hand. Not for ceremony, not for show, just to pull him up. He took it. Their palms met, fingers curled. And in that small, rough contact was everything: mistake, survival, choice. They walked back down together, not hurried, not cautious. The clan awaited below, not for approval, not for judgment, but to make space. Not because he was one of them, but because he'd stood when it counted. The rain came at dusk. Not in a roar, but in a quiet, steady curtain falling from the skies, like the planet blessing what it couldn't say aloud. It slicked the stones, curled smoke from the fire pits, and turned every glowing crystal into a droplet of captured starlight. The den didn't scatter. Instead, they gathered. Warriors sat in a loose circle around the hearth, eating, murmuring, sharing tales too old for translation. Someone passed Luke a drink, a spiced fruit blend warm against the rain. Norah sat beside him, tail brushing his leg just once. Not an accident. Not flirtation. Recognition. Across the fire, one of the elders raised their cup and said 2 words. Storm. Passed. And the clan repeated it softly, like a hum of agreement through the bones of the cave. Luke raised his own cup. Storm passed. Later, when the circle thinned and most had gone to sleep or lean against the walls, Norah and Luke walked one last time through the quiet tunnels. They stopped near her private alcove, where the air smelled of firestone and her scent. She turned. To him, arms crossed not in defense, but in thought. "It's done now," she said. "The rites, the bond, the gate." He nodded. "So what happens next?" He asked. Not as a question. As a hope. She looked at him long, her expression unreadable. Then, quietly, she stepped forward and pressed her forehead to his. Not a kiss. Not even affection. Something older. A valyrian promise. Their breath mingled. No words. No vow. Just presence. And when she stepped back, her voice was calm, final, and sacred. "We live."